came down. So now, what does Michigan do? It appears this is Dan Wetzel, and this is no surprise whatsoever on Moore, the offensive coordinator who did such a great job when Harbaugh was in and out of suspensions. He seems to be the one guy. But sometimes the emotional grab and what he did, that makes sense. Keeping the roster together, that makes sense. But is this a done deal, Paul, in your opinion? Craig, in your opinion, is this the right decision?
I think so. And then you got to, wait. Here's the other thing. It is not – I would think that Ward Manuel would be very stupid to have started even considering the coaches last night when Jim Harbaugh told them he was officially taking the Chargers job. Knowing this was probably happening, I'm sure that he's kicked the tires and looked around other things. And it is a hard thing. Do you go try to get Lance Leipold out of Kansas? Do you try to get Brian Kelly? Do you get a big name? Or because, look, the proof is in the pudding. It doesn't matter how big the name is. Your roster is going to get rated by it. I mean, people are going to go in the portal because they came to play for that coach. Ask Alabama, ask Washington, ask any of these teams, ask A&M, who thought maybe bringing back a coach who recruited some of these guys would help keep them, and they lost their two most highly rated players on the team. So there are, in the modern, day of college football, I think that if you want to keep a roster together that's already you feel is pretty built, and you're still going to lose some guys because they may not be more guys, they might be Harbaugh guys, but bottom line, this is the best chance to keep the most cohesiveness going forward while you've been on the best run of Michigan in a quarter century. So, yeah, I think it's the right decision because this is not the old school of college football where a big-name coach leaves and you try and bring in another big-name coach and the roster's just going to be there for him. It's completely different.
Yeah, things have changed, no question.
Yeah, I mean, the roster is always a concern, and that's part of the risk. But if you feel like the best move is to go get a new coach and you deal with that as part of the ramifications, then I think no matter what, you go out and get the best guy. You don't hire the guy who you don't think's the right guy because the roster might turn over because then you're just doing this again in a couple of years anyways. But, hey, you saved your roster. You go and get who the best guy is. But the thing about this one is that all signs point to Sherrone Moore being the best guy for the job. I mean, from his interim stint to the fact that he's been at Michigan for, 6 or so seasons now since 2018. So he's been around for quite a while. The players seem to love him and respect him. It's not as though there's the feeling that there's an exodus that's going to occur necessarily the same way that it would for a Washington or an Arizona, in that I feel like, with Michigan, a lot of their guys seem committed to Michigan, much less than the head coach. And maybe I'm reading that wrong, but that's certainly kind of the feel I got when Sherrone Moore took over as the interim coach. And I think that all of the Michigan faithful that I've come across seem to feel like this is the no-brainer move. Now, I'm sure if I dug further, there's some out there who have their own individual opinions that would prefer Lance Leipold, perhaps. You're not going to have 100%. Everybody on board on the same page, but I think this is about as close to it as you can get based on everything that I've read up to this point. The slam dunks don't always go in the net. I mean, sometimes they bounce out, so there's always that risk, but I think when you look at the landscape, you look at the possible risk with the roster, even though you're the defending national champ, so whoever rolls in there, it's not that you're lacking in NIL, you're not lacking in conference power, you're not lacking in tradition, you're not lacking in recent success, you're lacking in the recent head coach, but the guy who was the interim, did pretty well, but still, if he were to move on, it's still Michigan. So I think that you worry maybe a little bit less about who all you might lose. So all that being said, in my head, it seems like Sherrone Moore is the easy call to make here. I don't think you just do it today. Obviously, they're not going to just turn right around and announce it. Perhaps they do before off the air today. I do think you have to cross some T's, dot some I's, and make sure that you've really fleshed it all the way out. But, this one seems to be pretty easy to figure out and to move forward with Sherrone Moore as head coach.
So this is a note. This is a tweet from Couch, Dan Couch. He put this up about Graham Crouch. Angelique Chingelis from the Detroit News. She will join us again at 5:10 on the Harbaugh, the attorneys, the back and forth. And his note is that so everyone kind of knew that Harbaugh was more than interested than getting to the NFL. But he said Michigan administration appears to have lost twice. It neither retained the championship coach nor had the courage to stand on principle. And this is a part, of course, of allowing what he wanted, which was freedom. So what? And Angelique will explain this even more for us when it comes to her segment at 5:10.
Well, like they couldn't tell him, like, look, no, you can come back, but like you've got the NCAA knocking at the, like, more than knocking at the door. Like they are, planted here now investigating a couple different things because of stuff that you did. So he was trying to say, like, look, no matter what they find, you can't fire me. And that's like, you can't give a coach that much power. And it always felt, and I mentioned this last week, that something that they leaked so that the fan base would know, like, hey, we did everything we could, but let's be reasonable here. Plus, if you guys, thought he wasn't going to go back to the NFL, talk to your drug dealer because he's giving you some bad stuff. I mean, that's should have been how it is. I think that, it was always kind of this way. But, yeah, I do kind of agree. They lost twice here, but if they feel confident in Sherrone more, then that's fine. But yeah, they do. You lose the coach who finally won you a national championship for the first time in 26 years. But you kind of thought that when you brought him in that this was not going to be a forever marriage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about that kind of language about
it's right
not
here.
having the courage to stand on principle.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's a little bit harsh. I think that you have to draw the line somewhere, and just because the guy won a national championship a couple of weeks ago doesn't mean that you just give in to every demand that he has, including, hey, if I get y'all into trouble, I'm scot-free. I mean, what the hell? And you just want them to blindly go, okay, sure, you just want us a natty. We'll risk, future success, and you can go scot-free no matter what because you won that natty. I mean, yeah, you make some changes to the contract, you offer some more money, but for a guy who's found himself, in the crosshairs of investigations and has been suspended as recently as this year for violations. I mean, it seems like, hey, the criminal wants to make sure that in this next contract that no matter what crimes he might commit, that he can't go to jail for it. Well, yeah, I'd love to have that too, but I don't think that, the other side is probably going to be willing to agree to that. Not that Jim Harbaugh is a criminal, but I mean, it's kind of, that's how it sounds in my head. When like, yeah, no matter what I do, I can't get in trouble. Well, we don't love that, but yeah, that's a little bit of a strong reaction. I've seen a lot of that from Michigan fans of, it's Ward Manuel, and they didn't do enough, and they basically should have just done whatever they possibly could do to make sure that he stayed there. And I feel like that has to be some of the more fanatical fans and some of those who just want to win by any means. And certainly Michigan has, a lot of momentum going for it right now, but I think this is kind of an overreaction by some members of the Michigan fan base, because I don't doubt for a second that they tried to do everything they could to keep Harbaugh, but was he not going to go interview for another NFL job and another NFL job and another? I mean, how many off seasons are we going to do this? And at some point, when he decides to leave, that's not necessarily Michigan's fault. It's the guy wants to leave. He's been sounding the alarm for like 5 years now that he's interested in the NFL. So offer him $1 billion, but guess what? He might still say no because he wanted to go pursue something different. So yeah, I don't blame Michigan's admin for Jim Harbaugh leaving. I think Jim Harbaugh rose to the mountaintop, did the absolute top thing that you can do in the sport, and now wants to go try and do that in the NFL where he came close but wasn't able to quite get it done.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh feels to me like that. His lawyers in the contract feels like he watched one of those episodes of Law and Order where there's like 10 dead hookers, and it was done by a diplomat, and it's like, hey, he's got diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, diplomatic immunity.
He can kill all the hookers he wants, and then we can't do anything about it. And they're like, you know what? Not that, but. If you can get me that deal in my contract,
but you can't kill them and not be
come on now, like you can't do that. But yeah, look, he was always going. That's the thing. He was always
do you have the statement from Ward Manuel? Do you have that one?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, he was always going to the NFL. He was always going. But that was going to be the case. He was going to get them to the point where he felt that, he'd left it better than he found it, and he did that to the highest degree. And then he was going to go back and try to win a Super Bowl.
But here's the thing about that statement is that it says they did agree to it, and guess what he did? He still went to the NFL.
Yeah.
So the point remains that he was still going to the NFL no matter what you decided to do, and that's not on Michigan.
This is exactly what Ward Manuel, the AD, this is from Brett McMurphy, ultimately decided to pursue a return to coaching in the NFL. They discussed the contract. What happened is Michigan probably was not 100% ready to do some of the things, and then all of a sudden yesterday they decided it was too late. he was on his way. We had a great conversation tonight when he informed me of his decision to return to the NFL, offered his assistance in helping identify the needs for the program moving forward. So there is that. Jake Butt, again, who played at Michigan, Big Ten Network, will join us at 3:30, and then Angelique at 5:10. So there we are with that. And then all of a sudden, what in the world? This story just kind of popped. LSU. You want to say something?
I did want to make one little comment from a note I saw last night that there is only one, and I don't remember who I saw this from, so apologies because it just popped into my head now, talking about Harbaugh again, but only Steve Sarkisian remains as a head coach of a team that was in the 14 playoff this year. Everybody else is gone. Saban has retired. Jim Harbaugh's moved on to the NFL, and Kalen DeBoer's taken the job at Alabama. So that leaves Sark as the only of the Final Four still at his school. From
and he's kind of a puppy, really.
Just from 2 weeks ago, or whenever that was. 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Is that where we are at this point? I forget,
It was
a couple of weeks ago, I think.
2 weeks ago on Monday,
Yeah, so that's interesting.
I don't know exactly.